Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Today is Season 4, Episode 32, and we are going to be previewing the Monday night matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals here. And by we, I mean me, because John is actually going to this game. I don't know if we said that on the last podcast, but John is going to this game on Monday night, and so he couldn't be here for the preview because he's currently driving to Pittsburgh. But anyhow, the show must go on, so here we are previewing it, and let's just hop straight into some Steelers news. So starting first, we have Xavier Grimble has been placed on IR, which was the corresponding move to Vanette being added to the roster. Also with Vanette, he's chosen number 88, so watch out for him on Monday because he will be playing with Xavier Grimble on IR and Vance McDonald doubtful so far. Then the other little bit of Steelers news that may not seem like Steelers news is that the Eagles have signed Orlando Scandrick and in turn have cut LJ Fort to make room for him. This becomes Steelers news because this likely takes away the Steelers' third round comp pick they were getting for Bell. And that's a pretty big deal as the Steelers have been operating like they know they're going to get that comp pick. So now their choices are limited here. Supposedly LJ Fort has he has interest from the Baltimore Ravens, but I don't know if that factors into the comp pick anymore. Like, I'm pretty sure him getting cut takes away, but I'm pretty sure if another team picks him up, like, it doesn't factor into the Steelers' comp pick formula, as far as I know. So, it's going to be interesting going forward. What the Steelers can do to salvage their comp pick is to cut Dante Moncrief, but, I mean, which is possible. It has to be before Week 10. It's going to be rough right now. The wide receiver room isn't very good as a whole, and even though Dante Moncrief wasn't active last game and it's not going to be active for at least a little bit while longer, at least I think, it's just tough to cut a wide receiver right now when none of them are doing exactly great, if that makes sense. Like, there's no guy that's standing out that's like, okay, we could cut Moncrief because this guy's just going to be better. It's just I feel like they need to hold on to their wide receivers for now. I'm totally down for cutting Moncrief, but not at this moment, especially if it saves that third round pick. It might even get like a seventh out of it too. Might not net a little bit more since with Jesse James and stuff. But anyhow, that's all the Steelers news I had to get to. So going into the series history of the Steelers versus Bengals, the Steelers lead 64-35 in their matchups. And the last result was 16-13 on the Week 17 matchup at the end of last season, where we were almost more focused on the Baltimore game against the Browns and that, because it was what almost sent Pitt to the playoffs. But obviously they still they won that game, but they missed out on the playoffs. And the current streak is a whopping win streak of 8. The Steelers have not lost to the Bengals in a very long time, and the postseason record is 2-0 in the Steelers' favor. Now, getting into the injury report, I already gave you a little taste of it. Vance McDonald is doubtful with his shoulder injury. It is not likely for him to play. Look for the Steelers to go in with just Vanette and Zach Gentry here. Then Rosie Nix with a knee, Vince Williams with a hamstring, and Anthony Chickillo foot are all out again this week. None of them practiced at all, so it makes sense. And Rosie Nix shouldn't be back for at least, I'm thinking Week 5, but don't expect him back for a while. Then after that, the last guy on the Steelers injury report is Jaron Elliott. He's questionable with a hamstring injury. Now going over to the Bengals, Cordy Glenn with a concussion, Ryan Glasgow with a thigh, AJ Green with his ankle, and Kerry Wynn with a concussion are out. And then Carl Lawson with a hamstring is doubtful, which is very good for the Steelers. So going into this game, I want to start with the offense, and I just wanted to talk about the Bengals as a team. They're the second worst team against the rush for the first 3 weeks of the season, and it rose the question, is this going to be the game we see James Conner or other backs break out? Or has it just been tough matchups for the Bengals in the first 3 games? And just as a reminder, the Bengals played the Seahawks with Chris Carson in that rotation. They played the 49ers with, I believe Tevin Coleman got hurt in that game, but he played for a little bit at least with Matt Breida and Raheem Mostert. And then the Bills minus Devin Singletary. So my thoughts on all this is that I do think James Conner is going to have the breakout game. I think I said it for last week, but this is really what should be the week. I thought the 49ers were not that good on defense, as the stats said, but I'm starting to think maybe otherwise. I mean, granted, the Steelers' offense could just be bad, and the teams that the 49ers have played have also been bad, but I feel like a little bit more of a believer in the 49ers' defense than I was going into that game. But regardless, what I know for sure is that I think the Bengals defense is really bad. They just don't have the linebackers to deal with runs up the middle and stuff. And that's where James Conner thrives, even though they have been avoiding up the middle ever since Roosevelt Nix has come out. And that's just not James Conner's strong suit. I think we talked about this on the last podcast, that James Conner's an up and down runner. He's a guy that just goes straight through the middle. He's not going to make a man miss. And so going out to the outside to try and rush. He's not. He's also the fastest. So trying to go to the outside and maybe making a guy miss to break off a long run is not his thing. But I think that they can bring it back here against the Bengals, and I think that James Conner can get it going. At the very least, I think that Jalen Samuels is going to have a good game. I'm pretty sure that I watched the 49ers against the Bengals game. I watched a few of the highlights, and they really struggled against all three of those linebackers. All three of those running backs, whether it be Tevin Coleman, Matt Breida, or Raheem Mostert. Just every single one succeeded against them in some way or some form. But I just how do you put it? So I just don't believe in the Bengals defense at all here, and I think that the Steelers running backs are better than the 49ers running backs, even though the stats don't say so. And I'm 100% expecting the Steelers to use Jalen Samuels like the 49ers used Raheem Mostert against the Bengals, because Raheem Mostert got a really nice touchdown. I mean, it took some making some guys miss, but I want to see multiple running backs succeed here. This is the 31st worst team against the rush in terms of yards per game. The Steelers need to be able to establish a run here. Otherwise, they're never establishing it against any other team. I mean, okay, let me back that up, because the Dolphins are 32nd and the Steelers have them later. But it's not good if you can't establish a run against the 31st worst team against it. And that's me saying, to answer the other question, that the Bengals have not had a hard first three matchups. I mean, maybe Chris Carson, you could argue, but the 49ers running backs are just effective. I don't think they're that good. And the Bills had old man Frank Gore for the game. I mean, if Devin Singletary was there with how well he started this season so far, he's only got a few rushes, but he's been so good. But Frank Gore is just, he's an old man. Like, getting rushed on by him is just, it's not that impressive I mean, it's impressive for Frank Gore to do it, but the fact that the Bengals can't stop it is pretty bad. So I think that the Bengals are just a bad team against the rush. But the stats also said that the Bengals have been actually decent against the pass, giving up 237.7 pass yards per game, which ranks 12th in the league. So the question that raises is, how does Mason Rudolph look going into this game? And after last week, I didn't feel exactly great with how he was driving the ball downfield. He wasn't really looking for those guys downfield, and Randy Fichtner called him out for it. But I'm hoping he does a little bit better in this game, because I think that number that I just read out to you for the Bengals defense, Bengals defense, I think that's a facade. When you're a team that's so bad against the run, teams are going to run against you. If you're a team that's bad against the pass, teams are just going to pass against you. If you're bad at both, they're going to do both. It's just, I feel like here that the Bengals just allow teams to rush all over them. That's what they're allowing here. They're basically setting up for the pass, but they can't stop the run, so it doesn't really matter. So what I think here is that number is a facade, and that teams have just been able to run against them so successfully that it doesn't even matter, that teams aren't really even passing against them. So I think Mason Rudolph can take advantage here. It's more of a question of the wide receivers and tight ends who's going to step up, because, I mean, you only got Vanette and Gentry here, and that's really it. So really the question is going to be, how will the Steelers get them involved in this game, like basically the rookie tight end, the new tight end, and how will they work around only having these two tight ends that don't have that much experience, at least with the Steelers, and playing in active games, whether it be like Zach Gentry. And I think what they're going to have to do is, I sort of alluded to it earlier when I was talking about running backs, is that I think James Conner and Jalen Samuels have got to play a bunch. There's only been one snap where Jalen Samuels and James Conner were on the field at one time, but this should be the game that changes that, because you only have two tight ends that are likely going to be active. I can't see them rolling with one tight end. That'd be terrible. But they only have two tight ends for this game, meaning if one goes down, you can only even run with one tight end. And they're not even exactly proven guys. Vanette is, but he just learned the system, and he's only 90%, only feels 90% confident about the playbook, which is a lot, but I mean, he only got a week to learn it, and Zach Gentry just never showed anything, even in the preseason, and obviously John didn't like him very much, even getting drafted, especially in the 5th round. But so they're gonna have to work around this by having two running backs on the field a lot and being able to establish that run game, because you don't want to rely on the pass in this game. You want to be able to rely on James Conner and Jalen Samuels getting those carries, and maybe even Benny Snell. Benny Snell getting involved here if the Bengals are allowing it. If the Bengals are just allowing rush every single play, just rotate your running backs, keep them fresh, keep them energized. So I think that's how they work around the only two tight ends. But honestly, what we also need to look for, and what we've been looking for in basically every matchup we had so far, is we look for the wide receivers to step up, and who has to be the guy or guy to step up in this game comes into question. And really, I'm gonna put it on two people. I think Juju Smith-Schuster needs to step up. Not all of it's his fault. I think that he needs to get more catches early on. He needs to get more targets early on. Maybe Randy Fichtner needs to scheme something so that he's open. Mason Rudolph needs to target him a little bit more. He's the Steelers' best wide receiver, and he's not being utilized in at least the first 3 games until it's like too late for the most part. He's not getting catches. He's getting shut down, whatever it be. He needs to get the ball in his hands more. He's one of the Steelers' best players. And then secondly, I'm looking for Deontay Johnson. I don't have faith in Holton. I could go on a whole rant about Holton over and over and over again. Switzer can't run a route farther than 1 yard down the field. And then Moncrief's going to be inactive, and it's just who's going to step up? It's got to be Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson flashed last game with the 39-yard touchdown. He needs to keep building on his pretty good performance and become a bigger part of this offense. Also, after last week, I've been left with a bad taste in my mouth for James Washington. I just feel like he's never going to get it right. It's tough for me because I felt like I should have been looking for Washington in that game to really be the guy. I've been saying this, that him and Mason Rudolph have the chemistry, they have the connection, that he should be putting faith in this guy, but he's not, and that makes me worried. I don't think James Washington is ever going to work out at this point. I'm starting to get that feeling in my head that he's just another like Artie Burns type. Like, ooh, look at his preseason, look at how good he does here, and then it just never converts into anything. So I'm looking for Juju Smith-Schuster to step up, get some catches in the first half, unlike last week. And I'm looking for Deontay Johnson to build on his good game from last week and continue developing as a wide receiver and step up here. Because, I mean, Mason Rudolph needs help. It's not all... Mason Rudolph wasn't great last week, but he needs help. And speaking of things that weren't great, the offensive line had one of the worst games in recent memory against the 49ers. And you could argue that the Bengals' defensive line and pass rush is even better with Carlos Dunlap, Sam Hubbard, Geno Atkins, and no longer Carl Lawson, which is a good loss for the Steelers. But, I mean, still, Carlos Dunlap, Geno Atkins, and Sam Hubbard are a pretty solid 3. The question is, will the offensive line bounce back here? And I do think so. I think I witnessed the worst game they've ever had last week, and I have no reason to believe that will keep up. I do still believe that the Steelers are a top offensive line in the league. Everybody has their day. Everybody has a really rough one. Alejandro Villanueva had a really rough game last week after having a really solid one in week 2. But, I mean, I think they're going to bounce back. I think losing Carl Lawson was a big loss for them. He could play. He's doubtful, but it's not looking like he is. So I think the offensive line is going to do better here, especially against the run. I'm looking for them to really open up those holes in the run game. and really help James Conner, Jalen Samuels, and Benny Snell here. But I do think that they will bounce back. Anyhow, that really wraps it up for all I had to say about the offense. Let's get into defensive talk. And last week, it felt like the team really struggled without Vince Williams in the middle of the field, with Barron having a pretty rough game. And Williams is going to be out another week. He's going to be missing this week. And that being said, will the Steelers struggle against the run here, against the literal worst rushing offense in the league? And I'm going to say, yeah. I do think the Steelers are going to really struggle here. I think they're really going to miss Vince for the second straight week. And that's because I watched a lot of the Bengals-Bills game. And while Mixon didn't get it started early on, during the comeback that the Bengals almost had, Mixon really got it going. He was really good, I felt like. And even though the offensive line isn't great for the Bengals, I do feel like Mixon is. I mean, the Steelers are just not been good against really any running back so far this year. I mean, they've been good. I guess I shouldn't say that because they shut down Sony Michel. They haven't been able to have a complete game against all running backs because when Sony Michel was shut down, Rex Burkhead wasn't. You know what I'm saying? And then last week against the 49ers, I mean, no running back was particularly impressive, but they still put up good stat lines. It's just like the Steelers can't stop all the running backs. Maybe it helps them that Joe Mixon is like the only running back that the Bengals have, because all their running backs get suspended or they had to cut them for whatever reason. But regardless, it's Joe Mixon and Giovanni Bernard, and maybe that'll help them. But I don't know. I don't feel good about it. I feel like this is going to be the game the Bengals get their rushing offense going, for them. It's going to be rough. It's going to be rough without Vince Williams. I think the Steelers are really going to miss Vince Williams in this game. Then after that, it's no secret that the Bengals have relied heavily on the pass game so far, ranking third in passing yards per game through the first three games. How do the Steelers counteract this? I believe that the Steelers have to be forcing turnovers and by interception wise, and I think they had to have the pressure on Andy Dalton. If you're not getting pressure in this game, that's very, very sad. They have a very bad offensive line. They've given up a lot of sacks so far this year, and the Steelers need to be putting Andy Dalton under pressure and forcing him into bad throws, bad decision making to make them try and get into the run. Luckily, the Bengals are not a very good turnover team. They've had a lot of turnovers so far this year. In fact, they actually have the they have a -4 turnover differential, which is tied for 28th in the league, and all the last four teams are all tied for that. So they could very well be 32nd, and they have 8 turnovers on offense, and which is tied 30th. So they're not doing very good in that department. So the Steelers are looking good here. It's looking like maybe another Jimmy Garoppolo situation where I feel like the Steelers should have a turnover in this game, possibly two. The Bengals have fumbled the ball a lot too, so like that's something to look for here. So I'm looking for the Steelers to force an interception or even maybe some more fumbles, since the Steelers have been really good at forcing fumbles so far this year in this game. So that's how the Steelers counteract the Bengals passing. They got to be able to put Andy Dalton under pressure, and then you got to look out for the big guys like John Ross is going to be some guy to watch. He's very fast, and it's pretty much every time a fast guy is up against Joe Hayden, it makes me a little bit worried. But he slowed down last week, but who I'm truly scared about because I really like him, and Pittsburgh Steelers fans should be familiar with him, at least playing in Heinz Field, is Tyler Boyd. I love Tyler Boyd coming out of college. I loved him in his first year, and he's doing really well. He's been really well as the Bengals' number one wide receiver with A.J. Green out, and I like him. He still doesn't have a touchdown yet this year, but he's been used as a check down, and he's just Andy Dalton's safe guy. He's the guy that he just checks down to and stuff, and I really worry about him. I think that Tyler Boyd is a top wide receiver in this league. I don't know exactly where, probably not top 15, but I might, if we got to top 25, I think he'd probably be in there. And I would want to say top 20, but I'm not exactly sure on that. But he's someone to worry about. So what the Steelers got to do to counteract the passing game is be able to shut him down. I'm not exactly sure which cornerback is going to be on which wide receiver. I feel like Joe Hayden might go on Tyler Boyd while Philip Nelson goes on. I'm sorry, did I say Philip? I always say Philip. I don't know why. I think I confuse him with another former NFL player. But Steven Nelson on John Ross. But I think whoever is managing him is got to do a really good job. I'm not exactly afraid of their third wide receiver. I like Auden Tate, but it's just not that much. And their tight ends, I don't know how to feel about really. Tyler Eifert only had one catch in the past game, I believe, and Uzama's solid, but I'm not exactly sold on him being that great either. But yeah, so I really think that the key to shutting the the Bengals passing game down is to be covering Tyler Boyd, forcing pressure, and getting the turnovers from those pressure. But it's also no secret that the Bengals' offensive line remains as one of the worst in the league, after getting only one sack, but forcing a lot of pressure. So how do I feel about the Steelers' pass rush this week? I feel good. Cordy Glenn's out again. That's their best offensive lineman. And I feel like the Bengals are in for an awakening here. This could be a 7-sack game for the Steelers if everything goes right. It's just not a very good offensive line. Granted, they're not the worst in the league, which is actually kind of surprising. Going into this year, it really felt like they were going to be one of the worst offensive lines in the league, like literally the worst. Because they're not great. They've allowed 11 sacks, which is tied for 25th, which is not great. But I was expecting them to be 32nd dead last, but I guess there are other teams that just have worse, like the Browns, and I believe the Cardinals are another team that are above them, are tied with them, which also makes sense. But regardless, Steelers' pass rush is really good. It hasn't been as good as it has been in the past 2 years. It's not like a current, at least not right now. The Steelers aren't anywhere close to the top of the league in sacks, but TJ Watt has been playing out of his mind. Stephon Tuitt has been playing out of his mind. All it's going to take is for Cameron Hayward or Javon Hargrave to have his game. Maybe Devin Bush come up the middle. And I feel really good about the pass rush in this game. I really, really do. But that really leads us to our last point. And the defense was able to force 5 turnovers last week. Can they keep it up? And what is the realistic number here for turnovers? My high number is 3. My realistic number is 2. And my low number is 1. I do think the Steelers need to force 1 turnover here against this team. The Bengals aren't a very good team, especially with the turnovers. They have that -4 turnover differential and 8 turnovers so far in total. So what I am looking for is the Steelers to force 2. I think that's a realistic number. I think 3 is what I'm hoping for. 3 I think is still realistic, but 2 is what I'm really, really shooting for here. I feel good with Minkah Fitzpatrick. I feel good with the guys that the Steelers have in the secondary for forcing these turnovers against Andy Dalton. And like I said, they've just been a very good team at forcing fumbles so far this year. So Devin Bush is leading the entire NFL in fumble recoveries with 3, so fun fact for that. I just wanted to point that out. So he's doing good as well there. He's good at being around the ball and stuff to get these turnovers. He's not really forcing them, but he is there to recover it. So really 3 turnovers is what I'm hoping for against this team. But 2 I will take. 2 is definitely good. And that really just leads us with special teams. And I have a simple question. There's not really much to talk about with special teams besides who has the best special teams unit coming into this game. So first, I'm going to go over the stats and then give you my opinion. So the Bengals are just 4 of 6 on field goals, missing both of them from 40 to the 49 range, and being the only team in the league to have a field goal blocked so far. Then Bengals are 25th with 43.1 in average punting, compared to the Steelers' 9th at 47.9. However, things get much closer when looking at net average, when the Bengals are 20th at 41.2, and the Steelers fall all the way down to 22nd with 40.5. It just tells you that the coverage teams aren't good, and, I'll pound it into everyone's heads. Johnny Holton's not good as a gunner. Can I have everyone reply in the comments and say Johnny Holton is not good as a gunner? Because he's not. He gets blocked out of every single punt and kickoff there is. It just pisses me off to no end that he's still playing on special teams. And people I really trust for like information on Steelers said that Johnny Holton has been a good special teamer, and I have no idea what they see. I watched it's something I feel confident about. It's something that I've watched Johnny Holton, because every single snap I see, it's like, you were chosen instead of Cesar Skipper. You need to prove it. You need to prove yourself. And I've not seen him do it yet. And I'm going on a tangent here, but I just wanted to say that. But anyway, Bengals also have more punts which is 5 inside the 20 on less total punts than the Steelers do. Then the Bengals 21.6 yards per kick return is better than the Steelers 21.3. The Bengals 7 yards per punt return is way better than the Steelers 4 yards per punt return. And the Steelers 17.7 yards allowed per kick return is better than the Bengals 19. So it's pretty rough here. Both special teams aren't that great. And I feel like the field goal kicking is the most important, and that's where the Bengals aren't good. But the Bengals basically win in every other category. Punting average is okay, but net average is what's important there. And when the Bengals kicking the Steelers' butt there, I have to say that the Bengals have the better special teams unit. Not by much, but coming into this game, the Steelers have the better. I'm sorry, the Bengals have the better special teams unit. Really, all the Steelers have on them is the field goal kicking, and then the less kick yards allowed per kick return, and that's it. And it's just not. And the Steelers aren't even particularly good at it. They're both middle of the pack teams. So really, I'm just gonna final answer is that the Bengals are going to have the better special teams unit coming into this game. But hopefully, I'm proven wrong. So that really wraps up the preview for now. So we're gonna just go into the pick'em, and we're gonna start with Thursday night football picks that we made. It was Eagles at Packers, and that was a really, really good game. The Eagles were able to edge out the Packers with Aaron Rodgers throwing a last-minute interception when they had a chance to tie it up. It wasn't his fault. It was a almost exact replica of the play in Super Bowl Patriots versus Seahawks where Malcolm Butler picked off Russell Wilson. It's exactly what happened again, basically. And it wasn't Aaron Rodgers' fault, but still, I was surprised. I am glad to see the Eagles bounce back a little bit because they are a very good team on paper. And it wasn't that bad for the Packers to lose. It was okay that the Eagles bounced back. And what's really funny is they've won 4 of their last 5 Thursday night football games, and 4 of those they've been all 4 of the one where they were underdogs. So it's kind of crazy, but anyway, that was the Thursday night football game. And just to say it now, John's probably gonna do his picks on Twitter just so before tomorrow's game, just so there's documented that he made the picks before the game and stuff. He might even do some X factors and bold predictions there, and he'll do the Steelers' final score there as well. But anyway, getting into the first game, it's Titans at Falcons. The Falcons are favored by 4.5. I'm going to take the Titans plus 4.5. I don't believe in the Falcons. The Falcons have been a very bad team, especially with turnovers lately. And so I think that the Titans can stay in this by virtue that the Falcons are going to turn over the ball. I'm not exactly sold on the Titans winning, but I feel like it's going to be a very, very close game that comes down to the very end. Patriots at Bills. New England is favored by 7.5 points. Both teams are undefeated. I am going to take the Patriots to cover. The Bills haven't been exactly impressive. The Bills haven't beat anyone super good yet. They beat the Jets, which are a mess. They beat the Bengals, which are also a mess. And they almost let the Bengals come back on them. And, it's just the Bills haven't... And they beat the Giants, which were still led by Eli Manning and not that good. So I'm going to pick the Patriots to cover here. I think the Patriots are a way better team. I don't think the Bills are going to be able to do anything on offense, and that's going to be their biggest downfall because the Patriots defense is just way too good. I think the Bills defense could stand against the Pats offense. It's just I don't trust the Bills offense in this game to stay within 7.5. So I will choose the Pats to cover. Browns at Ravens, a pretty important game for the Steelers. You're hoping for the Browns to win if you're a Steelers fan, and Baltimore is favored by 6.5 in this game. I'm going to have the Ravens cover. It looks like the Browns are going to be without their top cornerbacks again. They're really banged up there. And Lamar Jackson has been balling out against bad secondaries. And with Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews might be out as well. So it's a little bit rougher. He doesn't have all his pieces, and Mark Andrews has been one of his favorite targets so far. But I still think the Ravens cover here. I think that Baltimore comes in and beats up the Browns and gets ready for the Steelers the next week. So hopefully the Browns win, though. Hopefully I'm wrong. Chiefs at Lions. Chiefs are favored by 6.5. I'm having the Chiefs covered by a lot of points. I would have picked the Chiefs probably plus minus 10 here because I just don't believe in the Lions as a team, and the Chiefs are just so good altogether. So Chiefs cover there. Raiders at Colts. Indianapolis is favored by 6.5. Jacoby Brissett is coming off one of his best games of his career so far. I think he continues, and the Colts team continues winning, and I think the Colts cover here. The Raiders just aren't a very good team at the end of the day, And I do think the Colts are still a good team, even with Jacoby Brissett. So I'm going to pick the Colts to cover. Chargers at Dolphins. Chargers are favored by 16.5, and that's way too many points for the Chargers. I'm picking the Dolphins plus 16.5, and I'm going to say something bold. I think the Dolphins win this game. There's not a better team in the league at blowing games that they should win than the Chargers. The Steelers are like a close second, but I've watched so many Chargers games just because I find them a fun team to watch. They just like playing it close with teams that are really, really bad in the past and everything. And they like to play on the skin of their teeth. They like to win a lot of games in the fourth quarter and stuff. And they blow games like this. This is going to be, mark it down, this might be the only Dolphins win of the year. I think the Dolphins win here. I'm definitely picking them plus 16.5. I think the Chargers aren't good enough, especially with all the injuries that they've had, to be able to just put away the game like that. They are not the Cowboys or Patriots. Anyhow, Redskins at Giants is next, and the Giants are favored by 3.5 points. And give me the Giants to cover here. The Washington secondary has been very bad, actually probably one of the worst in the league, which kind of comes to a surprise. I wouldn't have picked Washington as like the worst secondary in the league, but I mean it is pretty devoid of talent besides Landon Collins. Anyhow, but Landon Collins should have been enough to not make them the worst. You know what I'm saying? But Danny Dimes, I think, is going to continue, and Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton, my man. I love Darius Slayton. I think they're going to ball out, and Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram has been a monster so far this year. Absolutely amazing. I never saw that coming for him. But after that, you have Panthers at Texans. Houston is favored by 4.5 over the Kyle Allen-led Panthers. And what I'm choosing here is I'm picking Houston to cover. I don't think... It was hard for me because I wanted to pick the Panthers here with Kyle Allen because he balled out against the Cardinals, but it's the Cardinals, and that's the problem. The Texans... I'm not a big believer in the Texans either. Their team feels a little incomplete to me as well. But they were able to stand against the Chargers, you know. They played a pretty solid game against the Saints. I think that this Houston comes out and wins here. I think Kyle Allen's not going to have a repeat game, so I'm going to pick Houston to cover. Bucks at Rams. LA Rams only getting 3.5. I felt a little weird about this game. Like, it should on paper be a Rams blowout, but part of me wanted to pick the Bucks plus 3.5. But I am picking the Rams to cover. They've been not that great looking besides in the Saints game where they got to play like Teddy Bridgewater for most of it. So I am still going to pick the Rams to cover, but watch out for this game. I think the Buccaneers could keep this closer, and Vegas seems to think that Bucks are going to keep this closer. Seahawks at Cardinals. Seahawks are favored by 4.5 points. Seahawks cover. I don't know how this spread is so close. I don't see the Cardinals beating them here. Seahawks cover. Vikings at Bears. Chicago is favored by 2.5 points, and I'm going to take the Vikings plus 2.5. I think the Vikings win this game. The Bears' offense has been abysmal. Meanwhile, the Vikings' offense hasn't been much better, at least on the passing ground, but the Vikings have been absolutely amazing at rushing the ball with Dalvin Cook. So I think that's what it's going to take. The Vikings are a more complete team here. So, because the Vikings have a pretty solid defense and a pretty solid offense. The Bears only have an elite defense, but their offense is probably one of the worst in the league. At least statistically so far they are, even worse than the Steelers. So, you know, I'm picking Vikings plus 2.5, even though I hate Kirk Cousins. But still. Jaguars at Broncos. Denver is being favored by 3.5? Question mark? I don't really know what that's about. I'm going to pick the Jaguars plus 3.5. With the idea, I would have probably picked the Jaguars to cover by 3.5. I know Jalen Ramsey isn't going to play, but Denver hasn't been a very good team. Denver hasn't been able to even get a sack through 3 weeks. I mean, they should break it in this game, but I'm a little confused on how the Jaguars weren't favored going into this game, if I'm being honest with you. I felt like the Jaguars have been a better team. But regardless, to each their own. Cowboys and Saints. A pretty good game on paper. I mean, no Drew Brees, but I mean, Teddy Bridgewater put on a show last week against the Seattle Seahawks. But regardless, it's Dallas minus 2.5 and it was tough for me. I bounced back and forth. I really want to. I believe in Dallas this year, even though they beat up on small opponents. I also believe on the Saints. What I ended up choosing is the Saints plus 2.5. I think the Saints do win this here, and it really came down to Dallas's only beat up on smaller opponents. And granted, the Saints with Teddy Bridgewater aren't the Saints with Drew Brees, but we saw them last week against Seattle. They could ball out still. So I'm picking the Saints plus 2.5. The two buys this week are the Jets at 49ers. And that's really it. So now I'm going to get it back into the Steelers game here and to go over some X factors. You might have already guessed it, but my first one's going to be Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson's going to have to come up big in this game. If Juju Smith-Schuster doesn't show up, at least early on, Deontay Johnson's going to be the one that has to fit into that role because I don't see anyone else doing it. It's not going to be James Washington, not going to be Johnny Holton, not going to be Ryan Switzer. It's got to be Deontay Johnson here. So there's a lot of pressure on him. And the Bengals just put one of their best cornerbacks on IR. So this should help Deontay Johnson out a little bit, or maybe it helps Juju Smith-Schuster. I do not know, but I'm hoping for Deontay Johnson to be the difference maker in this game. Second X factor is James Conner. I think James Conner's got to take this game into his hands, return to form, get something going, because he hasn't been very good so far, and that fumble last week really just left a bad taste in my mouth. I'm hoping for him to have a bounce-back game and get his 2019 season onto a good note here, because it hasn't been good so far. Then I'm going to go pick TJ Watt as my first defensive X factor. I think that he could destroy this offensive line and take this game into his own hands. It really, really is going to be tough for the Bengals to block TJ Watt. He's only gotten better since his rookie year. He got better last year, and he's even playing better this year. So I'm looking for him. And then I have a really good feeling about Cameron Hayward in this game. Cameron Hayward hasn't been bad. Cameron Hayward has been really good at forcing pressure and getting tackles and stuff, but he hasn't gotten the sacks yet. And I feel really good about Hayward in this game. I feel like this is going to be the game that he also gets sacks, and he might destroy the offensive line as well. So let's get into bold predictions before my final score. And I'm going to pick James Conner to get 200 scrimmage yards in this game and bounce back in a big way. I'm going to pick 3-sack game for TJ Watt. I believe a third of his career. 2 have come against Cleveland. And I think that he does the third one here. Then I'm picking a bad bold prediction. Is John Ross destroys the Steelers for 2 touchdowns of over 50 yards. And then I chose Mike Hilton to get a sack and a forced fumble in this game. I thought it was pretty random, so I just wanted to choose it. So now, final score prediction, boyos. Bengals at Steelers. The Steelers are favored by 4.5. And I thought about it. I really, really gave it a lot of thought. And I am going to pick the Bengals to win 23-21, which would mean the Bengals plus the 4.5. And the problem is, if the Steelers couldn't put up more than 20 points last week with 5 turnovers, I have no reason to believe that they're going to be able to consistently put up more than 20 in any game this year. Granted, I did admit that I thought the 49ers defense was a little bit better than I had assumed coming into that game, but it's still not a very good outlook. It's just, I feel not good about this season anymore. I do feel like the Steelers are not a contender. I do continue to think that they're just a bad team that's going to be going through a bad season here, and I think it just gets proven this game by the Bengals winning 23-21 when the Steelers on paper should destroy this team, but they're just not good enough. So I hate to be the pessimistic guy, but I picked the Steelers to win the first 3 weeks in a row, and I feel like at this point I think the team might not be as good as we were hoping coming into this year. It's going to be a struggle to get 5 wins, to be honest, after what I saw last game. But anyway, yeah. This has been Season 4, Episode 32 of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. If you have questions, comments, concerns, you can comment down below, or you can hit us up on our social media or email. You can check us out there. All the descriptions will be down below. You can also you can also visit our website as well if you want to check out more things we post. We usually put the episodes on there first, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, again, all the descriptions will be down below. And everybody, have a good night. Go Steelers.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.